As I'm sure you know by now, n8n is a low-code tool. Oftentimes, simply dragging around the pre-built nodes is all you have to do to build out amazing automations and workflows. But when things get more complicated, knowing how and when to use the code node and write some real code can be an absolute lifesaver. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how the code node works. I'm going to go over when you should be using it, how to debug any issues, and arguably most importantly, how to use AI to help you write most of the code so that you can use this even if you're not a programmer. Welcome back to Tommy Codes. Let's get into the video. So I've got some data for us here in a Google Sheets. It's a list of orders. So if we go here, we've got the order ID, we've got the customer name, and then all of the items that were associated with this order. So if we look at order 1001, we can interpret this as Heidi ordered 6 widgets, 5 gadgets, and 5 whatchamacallits. That was order 1001. Then order 1002 came in, that was from Alice. She ordered 5 thingamajigs, 7 whatchamacallits, 5 gadgets, and then another 3 thingamajigs here. And what we want to do is take this data and figure out how many of these items were ordered total across all of the customers. So we want to go in and say, okay, that's 6 widgets here, that's 10 more widgets here, that's 8 more widgets here, that's 2 widgets here, and then we want to add those up and put them into a spreadsheet like this, where we basically have item and then total quantity. So maybe it's 100 total widgets. So that's what we're trying to do, and we're going to be using n8n to go ahead and do this. Now, before we get into the code node, I want to talk about when to use it and why this is a good place for the code node. The code node in n8n really should be thought of as the most advanced data transformation tool because that's really what it's for. And the reason I talk about data transformation is we have this column here, and yeah, it's got all the data, but it's kind of got some usability issues. It's just a string, which means it's text, and we need to parse it into JSON. And then the other thing is we have multiple orders associated with a customer. So in our looping, we're gonna have to do multiple layers of looping. We're gonna have to loop through each of the orders, but then also within each of the orders, we're gonna have to loop through each of the products. And you could definitely do this just using loop over and some other built-in tools, but it can start to get ugly. And if especially you had even more nested data, that's where the code node, or rather the advanced data transformation node, as I like to call it, is really gonna be coming in handy. So let's jump into n8n. I've already hooked everything up to Google Sheets. If we open this guy up here, we can see all of the data that we just saw in the Google Sheet. And if we look over here on the right, this item's JSON, it's not really JSON yet. And before we even get into the code node, I want to show you that you've probably already been using code in n8n. It's kind of sprinkled in everywhere. So let's grab an edit fields node. And what we're going to do here is we're going to have orders. We're going to add a new field. We're going to call it items JSON. What we want to do here is parse this items into JSON so that we can actually use it. And if we go over here, if we take a look, like this is almost something we should be able to just drag and drop. Like what I really want to be able to do here is drag the widget and the quantity, just like we can drag order ID and row number. And in order to do that, we're going to have to parse this as JSON. So this is going to be an object because we don't want it to just be a string. And we're going to drag in this item's JSON here. And if we test this step, we see we get this error here because it's saying, hey, that's actually a string. That is not a valid JSON object. And if we take a look at the actual code here, and that's what this is, anything under double brackets in n8n is actually going to be a small snippet of JavaScript code. And this $JSON, this is a variable, and it's referring to all of the data coming directly from the previous input. Now, when we just refer to $JSON and then items JSON, we're basically saying, let's grab out the items parentheses JSON key from the JSON object here. And if you're confused about JSON, I did a video recently about HTTP requests, and I gave a pretty detailed overview of exactly how JSON works. So go ahead and watch that if you're not following here. But anyway, the issue here is that this is still just a string. So what we need to do is do JSON.parse, and this is going to be some JavaScript right here. We're going to JSON.parse that string, and now notice that we get this like little array thing here. That's because now, instead of interpreting this just as a raw string, a raw piece of text, we are actually converting it to a JavaScript object. And now if we run this test step, we're still getting an error because it looks like we need to actually have this be an array. So let's go ahead and test that step. And now we actually see this, that we have 50 items in the output. And if we go into some other node here, so like let's add another set node just so we can see what the inputs look like. Now we can actually drag all of the items into where we want to go here. So that looks pretty good. But honestly, the issue here is, like I was saying, we have nested lists here. So for each of the 50 inputs, we actually have a variable number of outputs in terms of the orders. And what I mean is for order 1001, it looks like we had 1, 2, 3 products. So 3 line items associated with it. For order 1002, we had, looks like 4 line items. So now we kind of have like this nested array problem, and it's pretty annoying to deal with, to be honest. So something you could do is you probably could go in here and you could loop over items. You could try to get fancy with that. But honestly, I think it's just getting a little annoying. So that's why we're going to change this and actually use the full-on code node to do this transformation. So let's go ahead and delete this. And now let's open up the code node. We no longer need the double brackets like we did when we were just inlining code in the other nodes, because now everything here is going to get interpreted as JavaScript. Now, I should point out that Python is supported. I don't actually recommend this. The support isn't there. You can see it's in beta. And everything is going to work a little better with JavaScript. So unless you are just really good at Python, I don't recommend using it really at all. Okay, now one of the most important parts of the code node is this mode here. It's either run once for all items or run once for each item. And as the name suggests, and as the little description here, if you run once for all items, what that means is your code snippet is going to have access to all of the input data. In this case, that would be all 50 items. And you have one loop over it, basically. If you want run once for each item, then each of the items is going to be fed into your code one by one. And in this case, we probably want to use run once for all items, but there are use cases for both. The really important thing is to just understand which of the two you're using. And especially when you're talking to the AI, which we'll do in a second, you need to let it know which of the modes you're using. So once we're in the code node, you're gonna have access to these special dollar variables. So if we type in dollar here, we're gonna see a few different things. So input.all, because we are run once for all items, input.all is going to give us access to every single piece of input data. So why don't we actually test this step? And basically what we're doing here is we are just looping through all of the items. So there's 50 of them. And we are adding a new property called myNewField, and we are just setting it to 1. And so what's coming in here is 1, 2, 3, 4 keys. What's going to come out is going to be 5 keys. So let's go ahead and test step. And you'll notice here that now myNewField is there. And if we go into table mode, we'll notice that we have access to myNewField. So we basically just added a new key to each of the objects in the JSON array. And you notice here that you actually have to return something. So if you remove this return statement, we're probably going to get an error. Yeah, so it's saying nothing is returned. So you do actually have to return a final object, and it can be really any array you want. So you could actually just return, for instance, like an empty array, and then now that's going to say no output data return. So you could even do something like this and say like, my key, and then we'll give it a value of empty string. So you can go in here and you'll notice that that's one item. And then if you wanted to do another object here, we could do my key, and then like 1, 2, 3, 1. And now we actually have 2 items in the output there. So when you're using the code node, you actually have to return pieces of data. Now, in our case, really what we want to do is unroll all of the items. So we don't just want to return random data. And honestly, what we could do in the code node is we could just have it loop through and do this entire calculation for us. And that's totally possible because we have access to all this JavaScript. Now, I don't really want to do that. Even with my programming experience, that's going to be kind of annoying to do, and I don't really have time for that. So instead, we're going to have AI do it for us. And I'm going to show you basically the prompting strategy that I use to write these data transformations so that I don't have to write any of this code. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into JSON on the input, and this is very important. We are then going to copy it. We're going to go into ChatGPT. We're going to use O3 because it's much more advanced at coding and programming than the basic models. And we are basically going to paste in all of the input data. We're going to tell it that we're using n8n. We're going to tell it that we're using the run once for all items mode. And then we're going to tell it exactly how we want the output to look. And then it's going to go ahead and write all the code. And we should be able to just copy and paste it in here and have it work in one shot. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to type out this prompt. I'll come back to you guys in a second. Okay, so I've got the prompt here. We'll go over it step by step. So basically I'm saying, hey, I need your help writing some code for an n8n code node. Here is what the input data looks like. And this is the most important part. You have to tell the AI exactly what the shape of the input is because that's how it's going to be able to actually go in, parse out the different items, and give us a good output. So then I just literally copied and pasted that, and that's all 50 items. Now, if you had like 5,000 items, you probably wouldn't be able to copy and paste all of those. So what you would do instead is copy and paste a few of them and tell the AI, hey, this is a snapshot of some of the data, just so you can get a feel for what the different properties are, what it's supposed to be doing. Anyway, we're going to do that, copy and paste it, and then I'm just telling it, we are using the run once for all items run mode, and we are using JavaScript. So I'm letting it know like, hey, we're not using Python, and we are using run once for all items because that's going to help it understand which of the dollar variables are available and also like kind of the paradigm that we're going for. So that's very, very important. Then I'm saying, hey, I want to sum up all the quantities grouped by product. I want the output to contain each product along with the total number of quantity ordered. And so maybe you could spend a little more time and word this more precisely. I could say, I want the output to have exactly these properties and give it an example. That's totally fine. For now, I think it's kind of okay to let the AI make this decision. As long as it does something reasonable, this should be good. But basically, we want to be able to have some output that we can just dump immediately into this Google Sheet here. Okay? So let's go ahead and have it write that. That's literally all you need to do. Once again, you're telling it, okay, you're writing n8n, it's JavaScript, tell it the mode, and also tell it what the input data looks like and how you want the output data to look as well. Then it's going to go ahead and do its thing, and you're going to see here that it's basically going in here and writing all the code. So this looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and copy that, and then let's paste that in here. Let's test step, and there we go. So it wrote all the code for us. That is super helpful. And yeah, we can basically go in now and just go into Google Sheets. We can go in here and we can paste in the data. Why don't we do that? Yeah, so we'll go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we're going to go and grab my orders document. We're going to grab, it's called Sheet 1. And we are going to send each of these things. So let's go ahead, product and then total quantity. Let's go ahead and test step. That looks good. And then, yep, so now it's in the Google Sheet. So that is what I mean by it's really good at data transformation. That would have been a lot more frustrating if we had to do loops. And now our workflow is a lot nicer because we just have this one code node here. Okay, so that's at a high level how I would use this. What happens if there's an error? Like, what if there's a bug in here? So I don't know. Let's go ahead and intentionally put a bug. So we're gonna go ahead and do this. Yeah, so I intentionally put a bug. I renamed that the wrong thing. Let's test step. Now we get undefined is not valid JSON. Okay, so there we have some errors here. So in terms of debugging, as you can see on the right-hand side, you are going to get some kind of output from n8n. So it's giving us an error here. So if there was a bug, basically what you would do is you could honestly just copy and paste this or even do like a screenshot. And then in your chat here, go and say, hey, I tried to run this and this was the error I was getting. And that should help it a little bit understand what's going on. But if you need to dig deeper, what you can do is you can tell the AI to add console logs. So you can think of console logs as breadcrumbs. And if you notice down here, it's telling you debug by using console log statements and viewing their outputs in the browser console. Basically what you can do is, like, for instance, this list, we're like, hey, what's going on here? Like, it doesn't seem like there's any, it doesn't seem like this is being parsed properly. You could do a console.log, and then you could say like item, for instance, or I guess in item. And then what that's gonna do is output some data to the browser console. And so the browser console, if you hit F12, you're going to be greeted by this console here. You can go ahead and clear it, and you're going to make sure that you're on the console tab, not any of these other tabs. This is basically how web developers debug applications. And when you put these console logs in n8n in this code node, what's happening is they're going to get routed to here. And basically, this is going to allow you to see what's going on while your little program is running. And you can feed this information directly into the AI. So you could log the in item. Let's see if this works. And you see here that we get this node code. And then that's where the error was. So what you could do here is you could say like, hey, this is what the code looks like, copy and paste that back in there. And then you would copy and paste or even just take a screenshot of what your browser console looks like. And now you basically have a lot more visibility. You can give a lot more visibility to the AI by doing this. So definitely recommend putting console logs. So that's at a high level how this works. You could, of course, switch modes. That would potentially work for this as well. It would just look slightly different. Again, you could go to Python, although I don't recommend it. Some other limitations of the code node. So in terms of what you can do here, it really is just for data transformation. And what I mean is you can't actually make network requests. You can't really access the file system. So it's not like this is a fully fledged application. And also, if this starts to get really, really complicated, like if this was 500 lines of code, debugging is really frustrating. So really the code node, it's best for transforming data. It's best when you're kind of forced to either use the code node or have like nested loop over items, a lot of split into batches, that kind of stuff. So if you start getting really into the weeds with some of the more advanced data control and flow nodes, you might want to just look at rolling that logic up into a code node and having the AI write it for you. And I mean, it's good to know how JavaScript works. I didn't want this to be a tutorial about JavaScript. This obviously is going to be a lot easier if you know how to program and if you're familiar with JavaScript. But the point I made about the AI was, as long as you understand what you want to do to your data, like the before and after. So we went through there and we said, okay, like I know what the final output looks like. And I obviously know what the input looks like because I have access to it. If you're able to articulate that to the AI, it can write all of the code for you. And as long as you know a few of the tricks, which is basically making sure that you tell it it's writing for n8n, you make sure to tell it the mode that you're running in and that you're doing JavaScript, and you give it all the input and what the output should look like, it's very likely to get it right. And once again, I would recommend using O3. You could honestly probably get away with GPT-4o here. Anthropic, Claude, that would be really good here. Doesn't really matter. All of the fundamentals are the same here. You give it what you want the input, you tell it what the input is, you tell it what you want it to do to the input, and you give it the details of your n8n setup, and it should be able to help you out. So hopefully I was able to demystify the code node a little bit. Again, just think of it as a data transformation node and let the AI do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It's very good at writing JavaScript. I find it's better at writing JavaScript for the code node than generating n8n workflows from scratch. And so this is kind of a little hack that can allow you to have the AI do a lot of the work for you without needing to get too into the weeds with wiring everything up in n8n. So let me know what you think of the video. If you found this helpful, please leave a comment, and we'll see you next time on Tommy Codes.